Hello and welcome to episode 11 of The Lion's Den. Now today we've got a really exciting little episode to come because we have just had the Grotmas calendar release for Dark Angels. So that happened I think 2 days ago if you're watching this on Thursday, because I think it came out Tuesday. And I'm really excited for it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm Toby Bennett from Black Crow Gaming. If you've not seen any of these episodes before, do go check out some of the others. And I play a hell of a lot of Dark Angels, and I love to play them competitively, and I want to share that with as many people as possible. So if that is your thing, keep tuned in. And this is very much going to be talking about the new detachment and why I think it's actually quite good for us. So, Lion's Blade Taskforce. It is, as said, the Grotmas detachment. It's the first one. There might be more. We don't know. At least I think they said at least one for every faction. I'd be surprised if we do get a second, but I would love to be surprised. There isn't any context on the slate yet. So as of recording this video, that might change when this video is released, because if the slate comes out this week, it's likely to come out tomorrow. And I'm recording on Wednesday, and this will release on Thursday evening, which will be just after the slate. So I might be a bit screwed there. However, as of recording this video, there is no context on the slate. Speaking of, we're only on rumoured changes on the slate. So there's been a few going around, Terminators with 2 damage Stormbolters and things like that, from a very, very dodgy and shaky looking screenshot. But, it could be true, so just bear these in mind when we're looking at this. I would take it with a heavy pinch of salt, but, stranger things have happened. This detachment is centered around the Ravenwing and Deathwing, so really, really cool, big thematic win, because the Ravenwing are going to go out there, find the Fallen, and then the Deathwing are going to turn up and bonk them on the head. So I really like this. I think it's massively flavourful. I think it's super Dark Angels. And I think the major thing for me was that it solved the problem of, well, you can't just give Dark Angels advance and charge. That's not thematic. But it's given them some access to movement shenanigans without breaking that thematic side of things, without just going, Stormlance advance and charge. So I thought that was really, really cool. Is the detachment competitive? We're going to break that down. We're going to look into why either some of it's good, some of it's less good, and what sort of competitive lists I would start with as of recording this video. So again, this is before the new points drop. So suddenly if Deathwing Knights, spoiler, the list has Deathwing Knights in, got up to 280 points, it's probably not going to be that good. However, there is definitely still scope. And if that Terminator leak that I mentioned is actually good, then it could be slightly bonkers. But we'll come on to that in a little bit. So let's dive into what the detachment does. Now, in the Lion's Claws, essentially, it's split between Ravenwing and Deathwing. Ravenwing particularly help Deathwing. So if something is engaged with a Ravenwing unit, so remember that's all bikes, all vehicles that can fly, and obviously things like Ravenwing Black Knights, who'd have thought, right? So you're more likely to be using bikes, and we'll come on to that in a bit. But if your opponent is in combat with them, and they have to take a Desperate Breakout, which is on the roll of a 1 or a 2, they die. And Desperate Escape, Desperate Breakout, something else. And if they're Battle Shocked, they subtract 1 from the result. So it'd be 1 to 3. So there's a 33%. Is it 33%? It's a decent percent chance of them dying. It's been a long day, guys. Sorry that my maths is not the best, but it never has been, which is ironic for a game like this, right? And then the second part of the ability is that each time a Deathwing unit from your army declares a charge, if a Ravenwing unit is in engagement range with that unit, you add 2 inches to the charge roll. So 9 inch out of deep strike charges are now 7 inches. So they've gone from, okay, that's a long charge, to this is an average charge. I can do that maths. That's good at least. So I think that's really good. I think it gives us some flexibility. Super thematic as well. The whole Deathwing appearing out of nowhere to save the Ravenwing. Well, not save the Ravenwing, but to support them. I think it's really cool. It's given us that sort of movement flexibility, and I think there's some really good stuff in there. And also, it's just a pain in the backside when your opponent locks you in with, say, an 80-point Outrider unit, which is a bit of a pain in the arse to kill off. Because it's like, oh, I now have to risk losing more elite infantry than those Outriders are going to do in terms of damage in combat just by falling back. It adds so much scope and so many issues to your opponent's game plan. It just throws in variance where top players are always trying to take variance out of the game. So I'm a real big fan of this. So that's the detachment rule. We'll talk quickly about the enhancements because, in all honesty, I'm not sold on quite a few of these. There's one or two where I'm like, yeah, really like that. There's one in particular which I know people are very hot on in its current form. I'm less hot on that, and I will explain it. But I do think that with some of the proposed changes, it could be really good. So let's just kick off on the weaker ones. We'll start with Stalwart Champion, which is 25 points, and if your unit is battle shocked, add 1 to the objective control. So it's the Unforgiven sort of detachment rule. Well, part of the Unforgiven detachment rule for 25 points. I don't know if this is currently worth it. I don't think it's currently worth it, especially at 25 points and locked to certain characters, especially when it only puts them to OC1. Whereas, like, I just don't see this coming up enough to be worth 25 points. So, yeah, Stalwart Champion, I can't see getting much use unless, say, the Tyrannid Warrior Detachment is absolutely everywhere, or, the Chaos or Chaos Knights are particularly focused on battle shocking. Then maybe there's an argument for it, but in the current meta, it's not that good, but it's nice to have access to something that is very meta dependent. Similarly, Lord of the Hunt, it's 15 points, it's nice and cheap. It is only Ravenwing models, so that I think is literally just the Ravenwing command squad. I can't think of any others off the top of my head because you can't give an enhancement to Samael. I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments if I've got that wrong, but I think that is just the Ravenwing command squad. And it's just that if you can shoot and declare the bearer's unit is eligible to shoot and declare a charge in a turn in which it fell back. Cool, not bad. And it can reroll desperate escape tests. Yeah. Okay. If you have 15 points spare, it's fine. But I think if you have 15 points spare, you can probably spend it on the enhancement to the side of this, and that is Calibanite Armaments, which basically just gives a model an extra damage characteristic to their melee weapons, which I love. I think is really, really good. I love giving extra damage to things. Like, whenever I play CSM, I'm like, yes, Lords, give them extra damage for one turn. They go bonkers, they go through damage weapons, and they just knock the stuffing out of anything they come into contact with. And I'm like, I can do that for the whole game for 15 points. Yes, please. So there's been a lot of sort of early lists that I've done where Calibanite Armaments is featured very quickly because it's cheap, it's solid, it's not game breaking, but it's still just good. So I'll come on to where I've used it a little bit more later, but I particularly like it on the Ravenwing Command Squad, which is actually obviously on the Ravenwing Champion for this enhancement. And then suddenly he's got a damage 3 sword, which feels pretty good. I think that's going to bonk most things, especially if you couple it with the Ravenwing Knights on the charge, anti-monster, anti-vehicle 4-up. So I think that's got some scope to be really good. And then finally, Fulgus Magna. So I think this is one of the ones that's had the most conversation. And Deathwing model only, so it is your Terminator wearing dudes, your Blade Guard Ancient, funnily enough, as well. And basically it's uppy downy, which is pretty good. Now, Fulgus Magna, in its current form, I am not very excited about, because you're spending 20 points to send in some Deathwing Knights, because that's what people are going to use it with. Send in the Deathwing Knights, have them do their thing. They might lose a guy or two, and then pick them up and put them elsewhere and use the action movement. I don't think that's worth. Fulgus Magna is worth putting a character with Deathwing Knights, because you're basically then paying. I think the cheapest character is around 75 points. So you're paying 95 points just to give some Deathwing Knights uppy downy and like some superfluous abilities, and another dude in there that is just probably not as good as a Deathwing Knight. So to me, I don't think that's worth it. It sounds really good and it sounds really cool, but I just can't see it actually adding enough value to make it worth putting a character with your Deathwing Knights, especially when they're already 250 points. Like, that's so many eggs in one basket, and that's a basket that your opponent wants to kill anyway. So just adding eggs to that basket is just making that a juicier target, and I'm like, I don't. And that's my front line. That's my frontline unit. I need that to be getting in and trading. By pumping points into it, it's far less likely to trade, which I think is an issue. However, if the Terminator leak is correct, that suddenly Terminators have 2 damage Stormbolters, oh my god, imagine, and strength 12 Chain Fists that are AP -3, Fulgus Magna is really good because you put them on a Librarian, you put the Librarian in a Deathwing Terminator unit of 10, you drop that in, you delete something with their Stormbolters, you do a 7-inch charge with the Chain Fists, you delete another unit, and then you pick them up and you put them back in reserve. And by the way, if your opponent tries to move any sort of champ units, you just overwatch them to death because, by the way, that unit's got sustained hits and 2 damaged Stormbolters. And then you just go, cool, I'm now going to repeat this process again somewhere else. You probably can't deal with me going up down with a unit this efficient that also doesn't care too much if 1 or 2 of them die. To me, that could be super powerful. And like, I was looking at my Librarian in Terminator, I'm going, should I paint this just in case? I haven't yet because I still am not convinced by that Terminator leak. But if that Terminator leak is true, that could be very, very cool. So hopefully we'll know more about that soon. If the slate's dropped and that's irrelevant, then sorry. If the slate's dropped and that's a thing, take that into account. Okay, so enhancements, my opinion, probably Caliber Knight Armaments is the one you're going to see the most. You will probably see Fulgus Magna a lot at the start. I think people will come to the conclusion that it's not worth it quite quickly. But I think there might be scope where several of these are relevant. So let's just go with the weaker strats. Now, again, I'm going to caveat this because there is potential that these strats are not going to end up being weak. So particularly in the case of Illuminating Fire. And actually, to be fair, Overpowering Exaction, I'm like, there is definitely space where I will use this stratagem. Like, if I can just point at a unit that has bad leadership and is holding primary, or like denying me primary. So say, in its current form, Tempestus Scion's going, cool, I'm going to string across these objectives, and you can't do a thing about it, and I'm going to deny you primary doing that. If I can go, cool, I'm going to force you to roll average on a dice, like, yes, I'm exchanging CP, but equally that might get, so in my recent game against Nassim, that would have got me 10 points if I'd somehow managed to battle shock one of these units of Tempestus Scions when they were doing that cheeky string effect. So I really think there is some scope for it, which I've kind of described what Overpowering Exaction does. But you can do it in the command phase, or you can do it in the fight phase. So you can do it in command phase, which doesn't mean it has to be yours. So you can do it to deny their primary. So there's definitely scope for this to be super interesting, especially if you're just going, cool, I'm going to tag multiple units with Outriders. I'm going to out-OC the relevant unit with the Outriders, and then I'm going to try and battle shock the other unit. So it gives so many more things where your opponent has to bear this stuff in mind, that suddenly dice rolls are introduced into the game. And similarly, If you do that in the fight phase, it's going to stop their reactive stratagems. So things like start of fight phase, sorry, just to clarify that, it's going to stop things like Armor of Contempt, or it particularly if they've got a fight on death stratagem. This could be really, really impactful. So I know I'm calling this a weaker stratagem, and it is a weaker stratagem because it relies on a lot of people rolling under average on dice, or just average. Like if you are going up against a Space Marine, and if you've got something in engagement range, they just need to roll a 7. If you're playing me, use it all the time because my god, I can't roll leadership checks. But otherwise, it's okay, but it's spending a CP speculatively. It's having to spend a resource for something that might come off or might not come off. And it's not as like reliably coming off as say grenades or tank shock even. So yeah, just something to bear in mind. A little bit weaker, but still really cool and potentially like I would use this. I think in most games we'll see how things play out. And then illuminating fire, which I never thought I'd say that giving something +1 to wound is not really that relevant. But it's because it's a shooting phase ability, and a Ravenwing gives it to a Deathwing unit. So yes, you can do it for if you build a version with lots and lots of Hellblasters, or if like you particularly need to really kill an enemy tank and you've only got triple Redemptor Dreadnought because Redemptors might be back. That might be a thing. Illuminating fire can be really good because suddenly +1 to wound. You just put some Outrider bolters into it, and suddenly +1 to wound. Now these Hellblasters are wounding your tank on 4s. Oh look, it's dead. So there's definitely scope for like some more shooting ones. I don't think that's quite where these lists want to be, but it's cool. It's definitely worth thinking about, and you've got to think about what units can be Deathwings. So that's all Dreadnoughts. So getting +1 to wound for Ballistus is probably going to be wounding most tanks on 3s, sometimes even 2s. And then Redemptors, obviously, we've already mentioned, but also Land Raider Redeemers. I don't know how much that's going to come up because they're also now quite expensive. But particularly if you're over in the US, we know that Land Raider Redeemers are really good on GW terrain, or if your local uses GW terrain. This could be really good for you because suddenly that Redeemer getting +1 to wound solves so many of those problems. Like when I used to play Firestorm, popping the +1 to wound stratagem within 6 inches was just something I did every game multiple times. So illuminating fire is situational, and I think you have to build around it quite a lot, and it's not where I would want to be right now, which is why I've referred to it as a weaker strat. However, I still think it's really good. Like this is the thing with this detachment. I think there's so much scope for it to be just solid and decent, and potentially maybe a little bit more situationally good. But I think in the hands of the right player, there's the weaker elements of it can suddenly become stronger. Equally, I think there's lots of ways you can be unpicked. We'll come on to that later. But let's talk about the stronger stratagems. So probably the one that's got me salivating the most is Knights of Iron, and that's basically I can give a unit of mounted, a Ravenwing unit, which technically I guess is flying vehicles too. That's kind of cool. Hadn't thought about the implications of that, but it gives Ravenwing Breach, and it can do that in movement phase or it can do it in the charge phase. I think that's really good. Because the major thing that's held me back from looking at anything Ravenwing is that it can't breach. And if you play on UKTC terrain, you'll know just how frustrating that can be, particularly like when you want to get to the centre. There's usually like a big L made up of 2 buildings that stops you being able to do that. So I think just being able to go, cool, I have the threat to give this breach, and I'm going to position this in. So if you have to take that into account when you're planning that for 1 CP, suddenly I'm breaching through there. That's really cool and really good. And I think that might push Ravenwing, particularly like a death blob of Ravenwing, just up to that next level where you can reliably go, okay, cool, that's something I can do. Then Strength in Unity, so it's a defensive strat. You can't use it in conjunction with Armor of Contempt, which is a bit sad, but basically if your opponent's in engagement range of a Deathwing unit. It's the -1 to wound if they have a higher strength than your toughness. And if it's Ravenwing, it's -1 to hit. It's phrased horribly. Honestly, it's very difficult to understand exactly how this works. So take 10 minutes before you use this for the first time and just really familiarize yourself with exactly how it works. I'm not going to describe exactly how it works because just in case I cock it up, I know I'll get told in the comments exactly how I've cocked it up. So if someone wants to put the most beautiful response of how you use this and how it exactly works, feel free. There are rules lawyers out there. I am not one of them. But yeah, Strength and Unity, I think it's pretty good. Anything that makes this more survivable is solid. I think anything that's going to make those Ravenwing Black Knights stand up for longer. And we do, obviously -1 to wound if it's strength higher on things like Redemptor Dreadnoughts, Deathwing Knights. I think there's some real cool scope on that. Something really cool in Strength and Unity. And then finally, we're going to talk about the one that I'm kind of most excited about, but I also don't think will actually have the most impact because it's quite expensive, because it's 2 CP, boo. But equally, maybe we need to just start playing captains, although do we want to play a Terminator captain? I don't know. But luckily, Azrael gives us lots of CP. And essentially what that is we get to heroic with a Deathwing infantry or walker unit, just cause they are within 6 inches of us. Like, they don't have to have charged something else. We can just do it. It's very, very cool. And because you are the defender, and defender activates first, you get to fight first. So this strat has so much scope to threaten your opponent. If you can keep the 2 CP up, keep the 2 CP up, because my god, the planning that is going to throw into your opponent's game is ridiculous. And if they don't respect this, you might just pick up a unit that they weren't expecting to lose, slingshot up the board, and just suddenly Deathwing Knights on their home objective. Like, there is so much potential for this stratagem to go horribly wrong for your opponent. And they have to respect it. If they don't respect it, they're just screwed. So it's crazy to think that this stratagem could have that level of impact. I'm really high on it at the moment. Looking at it in a vacuum, I think it's incredible. If we look at it in game, I don't know if it's going to be as good as described in that vacuum. But equally, imagine your opponent fails that 6-inch charge. Well, I guess it would have to be 5-inch charge. But let's say your opponent fails their 5-inch charge. They roll Snake Eyes. It happens. You then get to reactive charge them, pick up their big scary combat threat because it ain't getting to fight first against you. Or you can do this with fights first units because you can stick a Judy in Inner Circle Companions, and suddenly that's a fights first heroic intervention unit that you go, cool, do please come on this objective that I'm hiding behind this wall but touching it, and completely stopping you from getting anything on the objective, because I will just go, hello, we're friends now. I think there's so much potential for this strategy, which would just be absolutely bonkers. It very good that it is 2 CP, but I think it could well be the real deal. We'll have to wait and see. It's good that we have Azrael, but is it going to be too expensive? We'll find out. But that's me salivating over the strats enough, I think. So here's a quick early list idea. Now, obviously, we're playing as Daddy because as Daddy is the best. But this time he's going with 3 Inner Circle Companions. And that is because it's another Deathwing unit. They've got the -1 to hit ability, so then if I pop the -1 to wound stratagem, they don't have to be anywhere near Ravenwing. But they do gain the benefits from the Ravenwing. It also means, anything that goes with Az gets the ability to do that heroic intervention. But I went with ICCs because it's a really solid unit for 90 points. I was between this and just standard assault intercessors. But I've opted for the 3 ICCs because I just think there's so much damage potential in that unit that, especially with Azrael, like it's really good. So we've opted for the ICCs. I'm kind of glad to be playing ICCs again because they're beautiful models, they're really cool, and I just kind of love them. The ICCs are probably the most flexible part of this list, so just bear that in mind when you're testing. They are something that I would quite happily drop if I needed to shave 15 points, 25 points, then ICCs would be something that I would look at first. Then the other HQ that we've got is Ravenwing Command Squad, with the +1 to wound, +1 damage enhancement to get that damage 3 sword on the champion, and then 6 Ravenwing bikers. So you can pick one up a turn. They can heroically intervene, and I think they add an inch on to their charges, maybe. No, I can't remember. But yeah, they're solid. And they're also OC3 apiece. And they've got 5 up in Vun. They obviously can get the -1 to hit. When they charge into when they charge, they get anti-vehicle, anti-monster 4 up. The damage 1 is not ideal. They've just got cursed weapons, but make them good boy weapons. So they're all right. And they've got plasma talons, which I'm like, oh, if I overcharge this is a real risk. But I think that sort of that death blob with the potential to just go, cool, I'm going to move it through a wall and beat the living daylights out of that unit that's on an objective, and then I'm going to sit on this objective and make you focus on this Ravenwing bike squad rather than the Mace DWKs that we're about to talk about. I think there's some real scope there. Just to, again, force your opponent to make more decisions. And if you force your opponent to make more decisions, they are more likely to make a mistake. So that is kind of how you win Warhammer. You want to try and outthink and outsmart your opponent. And by forcing them to make those decisions with open information, do remember that, then that is how you can win your games. Speaking of which, Deathwing Knights, they just win games because they're awesome. But yeah, we've got the standard 3x5 Mace Deathwing Knights. These guys are going to start in reserve, I think, all 3 of them. I'm going to start in reserve. They're going to drop in on turn 2 in all likelihood and go for that big go turn. Might be turn 3. Not 100% sure yet. Need to get a bit more taste for the list to understand exactly how best those Deathwing Knights are used. But I think it's likely to be a big turn 2 go turn, or you just start outscoring your opponent because you've got all of these different Gribbly units that are survivable, have high OC, and could just be a bit of a pain in the bum. So then we've got a couple of Ballistas Dreadnoughts because we wanted some long-range pew-pew, and I really like Ballistas Dreadnoughts. They are also Deathwing, so they get those bonuses, and they're a 2-up save. They're a Dreadnought chassis for 130. Like, what is not to like about that? And they have nasty guns. And again, I've spoken about Ballistas in my previous video, but not having to oath the target that they're going to go at is really nice. Just being able to go, cool, I don't need to worry about the rerolls there. That can be the inbuilt rerolls, which then frees up my oath target for something that, say, the Ravenwing are going to go after, or the Deathwing Knights, just to make sure that I'm killing the units that I need to kill that turn. Then we've got 2x5 scouts because scouts are good. Never leave your scouts at home. Infiltrating the scout is a hell of a drug. They are super, super good. And also, just this list is quite susceptible, I think, to being infiltrate move blocked or scout move blocked. And scouts just make that harder for your opponent to do. They get in the way, they drop in first in deployment, just cause issues, and they can get up in your opponent's face, delay them just for however long you need them to do, and then that can get you ahead in your scoring. So scouts, I think, still are an auto include. They just seem really good. Anything that has, like, every army needs something with infiltrate, right? Like, that's just kind of a given. And scouts are just such a decent unit. Like, you just look at them and go, well, they're 65 points. Why would I leave these guys at home? Then I think the biggest weird thing here is 3x3 Outriders. Now, a lot of people have been going ATVs. We need to start playing ATVs. And I get it, but I don't think it's correct. Because ATVs are not durable. It's like one las cannon can take nearly all of their wounds off, while as one las cannon just melts one outrider, and it's 20 points difference. And it's a significant amount of OC difference. But more importantly, outriders auto advance 18 inches. They auto advance 6 inches, allowing them to go 18 inches. It'd be really cool if suddenly they could go 30 inches. But yeah, they auto advance that 6 inches, which is going to help you get into that position where you can then go for that big turn. You can charge through it, and you don't need to spend your CP on Knights of Steel or whatever it's called, Knights of Iron, to let them breach, because they've got so much movement that they're able to get into that position. And it doesn't matter that they're not doing anything that turn. It's just threat of primary. They might just need to go in and get behind enemy lines. They might just need to get in for engage on all fronts. There's just more movement option with Outriders. And for 20 points, for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer, because they're still a pain in the arse to deal with, because they're still a 3-up save, they're still T5, there's 4 wounds on them, and there's 3 of them there. So I think they're really good. So definitely something to bear in mind there. Outriders at 80 points now. I think they're a bargain, and they really enable this list to just pop off while giving it some good scoring and giving it good primaries and all. So yeah, I really like the Outriders. And then just some infiltrators, because I like to screen my backfield. I'm pretty sure we just had the Thousand Suns detachment drop today. And in that, there was the 6-inch deep strike with Scarab Colt. I think that is the confirmation that we will in fact be going from 3-inch to 6 inches, as a leak said. But I'm still taking infiltrators, because even if they're 9-inch deep striking, I like having infiltrators to go, no, you are not declaring a charge. Cool. Okay, so final thoughts. As you can probably tell, I really do think this list has competitive play. I need to test it. I need to get my hands on it and really have a crack at it. But yeah, initially I'm like, cool. I'm excited for this. I think it's got some really diverse choices you can make. Like, I spoke a lot about Redemptors. I spoke some amount about Flyers, and a little bit more about like ICC heavy lists. And there was 3 ICCs in my list, and they were just there to bodyguard as. Like, there's so much diversity potential from this. Like, sure, I've gone for the auto, 3 Deathwing Knights, all that kind of thing, because I know it's good. I know I'm comfortable with it. I know it's a powerful ability to use. But equally, that might not end up being the best thing. But I really like the diversity of choice. Like, of the people that I've seen, so John from 6++, and Alan, who's also one of my teammates from Black Crow, we've all made super different lists. Like, when we've just been talking about like what units we're excited for to put in this list, none of us have really said the same units. So obviously, like, we mentioned kind of similar ones. There's not that many Raven Wing units, but like there's still a hell of a lot of diversity in those conversations. So I think, and because there's people that sort of that do know what they're talking about. Don't let Alan know that I said he knows what he's talking about. I'll go to his head. Love you, Alan. But like, the people that know what they're talking about are saying lots of different ideas. Like, I think that's a really positive thing to come out of this detachment. And that's just what we need to see, because otherwise it is just going to be like I sort of criticised the last slate. It was just, I'm going to take 3 Deathwing Knights. I'm going to take 3 long range shooting, which is either the Predator Destructor or the Ballistic Dreadnought, and I'm going to take 3 Scouts because I have to, because otherwise I'm just going to lose the game. So yeah, I think that's really, really cool. One caveat, and I don't want to panic anyone, but one caveat that I will say is, will we get locked out of Codex Space Marine detachments? Because is this a sign that our detachments are actually going to be quite good and quite reasonable, and is a way of balancing Codex Space Marines by stopping divergent chapters from using things like Gladius, things like Stormlance, which is traditionally where we really thrive. Now, that is coming from a space where our detachments really are incredibly poor right now. Like, this is a competitive show. It's all about like making sure you get the best result from your Dark Angels. And ultimately, unfortunately, our detachments just aren't a conversation in that. This one might be, so really, really cool. Really excited for that. I do slightly worry that we might get locked out of Codex Space Marine detachments, but equally, let's cross that bridge if it comes to it. And I think there's some fallbacks, and if that does happen, I think there will be some reworking of our detachments in general. That's all hearsay. There is nothing to back that up. There is no leak that I've seen, no even little whisperings that I've heard from network, like nothing like that. So that is, stick the finger in the air and guess, right? So take it with a pinch of, take it with like a salt mine level of salt, in all honesty. Okay, right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up there. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for watching. We really, really appreciate it. We love having you guys coming on and giving us some likes, subscribes, comments. I do read every single comment. Haven't been able to recently, just because life has been super busy for me with my like actual job and things like that. So unfortunately, I haven't had as much time for Warhammer as I would like, but I really do love the fact that there is there's content, like there's people wanting more content, there's people taking their time to watch this content, comment on it, all that kind of. Even if you take the time to go, I didn't like this, like that's feedback. That's cool. I like that because it helps me improve. I as you can probably tell, this is very low budget. Just I sit in my room, I have a mic, and I talk. And if you guys like that, that's brilliant. That's really cool. And if it helps you, even better. Like that brings me a lot of joy that might help people play their toy soldiers a little bit better. But yeah, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Do join the Discord. Provide feedback down there. Give us comments. Give your opinions on what you think it's going to look like. And then I'm just going to mention our lovely sponsors, Glasshammer Gaming. You can use the code Black Crow to get 5% off. Really good. Use that because you might need to buy some more models because there's a slate coming. And there's also Terrain Forge, where if you fancy getting yourself a lovely new terrain set, you can put in a code BCG5 and get another 5% off that. So, actually, one thing before I go is that someone has now quoted my catchphrase back to me, which I thought was really funny and really cool. Little bit nerdy for moment of I'm in a nerd community for playing toy soldiers, and I have a catchphrase. Maybe I'll put that on my Tinder profile, and just all the ladies will come in, definitely, 100%. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Stay loyal, fuckers. We'll see you next time.